Ethan Marlowe floated in the observation deck of the orbiting station, his hands resting lightly on the railing. The station hovered above the blue-green swirl of Earth, a fragile jewel suspended in the black. He could see the pale curve of the horizon and the faint shimmer of the atmosphere. It was a view humans had dreamed of for centuries, but seeing it from orbit still gave him a sense of awe. He let out a soft sigh and shook his head, trying to push the feeling aside. He had work to do, and the work was about to get very unusual. The station's main hall was bustling. Humans and aliens moved through the corridors, each group careful to respect the other's customs. The Virelians were the most prominent of the visiting species, a civilization older and technologically superior to humanity. They were tall, lithe beings with translucent skin that shimmered faintly, and their eyes held a depth that humans often described as seeing through your thoughts. Rumor had it that a single Virelian could outthink a dozen human diplomats. Ethan had studied their history, their protocols, their culture, but nothing could prepare him for meeting one face-to-face. He adjusted his suit and smoothed his hair, though he knew it would do little against the meticulous gaze of the aliens. Today, he was to attend the ceremonial exchange, a formal event that had been scheduled for months. Earth was making a small but meaningful offering to the Virelians, a diplomatic gesture to show that humanity was ready for more responsibility in interstellar relations. Ethan, as a junior diplomat, was part of the delegation. As he stepped into the main hall, he noticed the crowd parting, almost instinctively, as if they sensed the presence of someone important. Or perhaps it was because the Virelians themselves had entered the room. At the center of the hall stood Lysara, a Virelian woman of striking presence. She moved with a grace that seemed almost liquid, her form glowing softly under the hall's lights. Humans often found her intimidating, and even seasoned diplomats found it hard to meet her gaze for more than a moment. Ethan felt a flutter in his stomach but quickly pushed it aside. He had rehearsed for this meeting countless times, running through every protocol, every expected question. But as he approached, he realized that no amount of preparation could cover what he felt now, the sheer weight of intelligence, power, and subtle danger in Lysara's presence. The ceremony began with formal greetings. Speeches were exchanged in languages both human and alien, and Ethan tried to follow the nuances of Virelian etiquette. Every gesture mattered. Every word had layers of meaning. As he listened, he noticed Lysara observing him, her gaze calm but intense. Then came the moment that changed everything. During the formal exchange, Ethan, trying to ease the tension in the room, made a small joke. He said with a wry smile, "Well, if anyone were to propose to me, I'd have to think carefully. But I suppose I might say yes, just to see what happens." He felt the sweat start at the back of his neck, and then she spoke. Leaning slightly toward him, her voice a soft, melodic whisper that somehow carried across the distance between them, Lysara said, "Then say yes to me." Or had he accidentally insulted her in a way that humans could never understand? He forced himself to smile, to maintain a calm exterior. I think I need to understand what I'm agreeing to first," he said carefully. Lysara's lips curved into something resembling a smile. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it carried the weight of a challenge. The room remained quiet, everyone holding their collective breath. Ethan realized he had just stepped into something far bigger than a simple ceremonial exchange. The proposal, whatever it truly meant, was more than a personal question. It was a test of diplomacy, intelligence, and cultural understanding. He needed to navigate it carefully, or humanity might lose more than just face. After the ceremony, Ethan was escorted to a quiet observation lounge away from the crowd. He sank into a chair and tried to think. The humans around him were whispering, debating what to do next. Should they tell him to ignore it? Should they intervene? Ethan held up a hand. "No," he said firmly. "I need to handle this myself. This isn't just about me. It's about showing that humans can think, adapt, and respond to challenges the right way." It was an opportunity, but also a trap if he misstepped. Ethan spent the next hours reviewing every piece of information he had on Virelian customs. They valued honesty, intelligence, and creativity. They respected those who could navigate complexity without fear. They tested newcomers with scenarios that measured patience, ethical reasoning, and ingenuity. A wrong move could mean embarrassment or worse, being dismissed as unworthy of interstellar dialogue. He recalled stories of other species failing these tests. They had underestimated the Virelians, trying to impress them with brute force or empty flattery. Those failures had been spectacular. Ethan had no intention of repeating them. When he returned to the main hall later that evening, the atmosphere had changed. Aliens and humans alike watched the interactions with heightened attention. Lysara moved among the delegates, observing, listening, calculating. When their eyes met, she tilted her head slightly, acknowledging him without words. It was a silent message. The game had begun. Ethan knew he had to act, but he also knew that human instincts, humor, empathy, and creativity were his strengths. Aliens, no matter how advanced, often failed to anticipate the human mind. They were logical, precise, and centuries ahead in technology, but humans had unpredictability, intuition, and the ability to see connections that others missed. He had to use those qualities now. He began small, testing her reactions with subtle gestures and careful words. Each interaction was measured. A joke here, a question there. He avoided arrogance, yet maintained confidence. He needed to show that humans could adapt, could read complex social signals, and could respond with ingenuity under pressure. By the time the first day of the ceremony ended, Ethan felt a cautious sense of accomplishment. He had survived the initial encounter without offending anyone, and he had given humanity a small but meaningful victory. The demonstration that they could match the Virelians in diplomacy, even if not in sheer intellect or longevity. That night in his quarters, Ethan looked out at the stars. The station drifted silently in orbit, Earth far below. He knew the real challenge was only beginning. Lysara's test was not over. The proposal, whatever it truly meant, was just the opening move. Tomorrow, he would face scenarios designed to probe his intelligence, morality, and adaptability. He took a deep breath. Humanity had always been underestimated. From surviving on a fragile planet to exploring the stars, humans had a habit of proving themselves in ways others never expected. Ethan felt a surge of determination. He would face whatever came next. He would use every human strength, cunning, humor, empathy, creativity to navigate the challenge, and in doing so, he would show the galaxy what humanity was truly capable of. As sleep claimed him, he couldn't help but smile faintly. The test had begun, and he was ready, not just for himself, but for all of humanity. In the vast darkness of space, with alien eyes watching and tests ahead, a single human stood poised to show that even in a galaxy far older and wiser than Earth, humans could shine. And somewhere in the silence, Ethan felt it. Lysara's gaze lingering even when she wasn't there, a quiet acknowledgement of the game, and a promise that tomorrow would demand everything he had to offer. Humanity had just taken its first step into a larger universe, and Ethan was at the center of it all. The next morning, Ethan woke to the soft hum of the station's life systems. Light filtered through the windows, casting a glow across the observation deck. The curve of Earth below seemed sharper today, its oceans brighter, its cities glinting like tiny constellations. He stretched and rubbed his eyes, mentally preparing himself for the next phase of the Virelian challenge. Lysara had scheduled a private session. Not a formal meeting, not a public event, but a one-on-one interaction designed to test his abilities. Ethan knew that what awaited him could range from simple protocol exercises to complex simulations that tested both his mind and character. He had read about humans who had failed such tests before. Some had been dismissed, others had embarrassed themselves publicly. Ethan didn't intend to be either. He intended to excel. The hall was quiet when he entered, starkly lit with soft, luminescent panels that highlighted the elegant curves of the chamber. Lysara stood near the center, her presence filling the room without effort. She turned her eyes toward him, and for a moment Ethan felt as if she were seeing not just him, but through him, reading his thoughts and intentions. "Good morning, Ethan," she said. Her voice was calm, smooth, carrying authority without harshness. "Today we will begin your first trial. It is simple in concept, but reveals much about character and intellect. Are you prepared?" "I am." His voice sounded steadier than he felt. He was nervous, of course, but humans were built to adapt. That was something the Virelians could not always predict. Lysara motioned to a console, and a holographic display flickered to life. Shapes, symbols, and patterns appeared in midair, floating between them. Some were geometric, some abstract, and a few resembled faint images of creatures unfamiliar to human eyes. Ethan recognized a pattern immediately. The display was not random. It was a puzzle, a complex arrangement requiring logic, intuition, and creativity. "You are to solve this sequence," Lysara explained. "But solutions are not always singular. The answer I seek is one that demonstrates understanding, innovation, and integrity. Choose wisely." He moved his hands cautiously, manipulating the holograms, trying different sequences, noticing subtle cues embedded within the arrangement. Every adjustment made the patterns shift slightly, responding to his choices in ways that felt almost sentient. Hours passed, though it felt like minutes. Ethan's mind raced, mapping possibilities, discarding impossibilities, testing alternatives. At one point, a mistake caused part of the pattern to collapse entirely, and he feared he had failed. But instead of punishment or rebuke, the holograms shifted, presenting a new opportunity to rethink the problem. It was clear. The test was not merely about getting the right answer. It was about the approach, the thought process, and the ability to adapt when the unexpected occurred. When he finally solved the sequence, the holograms dissolved in a cascade of light, and Lysara inclined her head slightly. There was a faint acknowledgement in her gaze, a hint of respect. Ethan allowed himself a small, careful smile. The first trial was complete and he had passed, but there was no time for relief. The next trial was subtler, more insidious. Lysara led him to a smaller chamber, where the walls seemed to shimmer and shift. Ethan realized quickly that this was a test of perception, one designed to measure not just intelligence, but emotional awareness and moral judgment. The chamber presented scenarios, simulations that felt real, challenging him to act under pressure. In the first scenario, he saw a group of Virelian engineers trapped in a collapsing structure. The simulation gave him options: follow protocol strictly, save only the ones easiest to reach, or improvise to rescue everyone. Ethan hesitated, weighing the consequences. Following protocol would be safe, but humans were never safe. They thrived by taking calculated risks, by making choices that others might consider impossible. He acted, using tools in unexpected ways, moving debris, coordinating with holographic helpers. It was risky, but it worked. All the engineers were saved. The chamber shimmered, the simulation dissolving into the soft glow of the room. Lysara's gaze was fixed on him, measuring every decision, every moment of hesitation. Next came the puzzle of negotiation. Ethan found himself facing a holographic council of alien delegates, each with conflicting demands. The scenario was designed to test diplomacy, ethics, and persuasion. He quickly realized that simple compromise would not suffice. Each choice had cascading consequences, and every action reflected on him personally, and by extension, humanity. Ethan took a deep breath and spoke carefully. He proposed solutions that balanced fairness with practicality, offering creative compromises that satisfied the delegates' core needs while preserving essential principles. It was risky, some solutions were unconventional, bordering on audacious. But the delegates accepted, their holographic faces showing surprise, then approval. Ethan smiled internally. Humans were unpredictable, yes, but they were capable of brilliance precisely because of that unpredictability. As the day wore on, the challenges grew more intricate. Ethical dilemmas intertwined with technological problems. Physical simulations tested endurance, but always with a focus on intellect and ingenuity rather than brute strength. At one point, he had to design a temporary energy conduit using limited resources to prevent a catastrophic failure in a simulated starship. The materials provided were minimal, yet he managed to fashion a solution that even impressed the AI monitoring the scenario. Lysara observed all of it without interference, rarely speaking except to ask a probing question or give a subtle cue. Her silence was intentional, Ethan realized. She wanted him to reveal his capabilities naturally, to show how a human mind approached problems without guidance. And in that, humans had an advantage. While other species relied on strict training and experience, humans could innovate in ways the rules could not anticipate. By the end of the day, Ethan was exhausted. Sweat dampened his brow, and his muscles ached from the mental strain. Yet in every challenge, he had proven that humans were more than mere novices in the galactic stage. They were clever, resourceful, and capable of moral and intellectual judgment that even the Virelians had to respect. Lysara finally spoke as they returned to the observation deck, the earth below casting a serene glow across their faces. "You have performed well, Ethan Marlowe," she said softly. "Your methods are unorthodox yet effective. You possess qualities that few species exhibit: ingenuity, persistence, and adaptability. You think beyond rules, beyond the obvious. That is why you are here. We survive not because we are the strongest, but because we learn, adapt, and find solutions where none seem possible." Humanity had been underestimated, as always. But in these moments, in the face of challenges that tested intellect, courage, and morality, humans had an edge that could not be taught or simulated. The session ended, but Ethan knew this was only the beginning. The trials would continue, each more complex than the last, yet he felt a quiet confidence. Humans had survived ice ages, natural disasters, and conflicts on their fragile planet. They had explored space with ingenuity and perseverance. And now, in the halls of an alien civilization older than humanity could fully comprehend, he was proving that human qualities, creativity, empathy, humor, and courage could hold their own in the galaxy. As he floated back to his quarters, Ethan allowed himself a small, private laugh. He thought of the moment when he had joked about saying yes to a proposal. At the time, it had seemed like harmless humor, a way to ease tension. But now he understood. The joke had been a test. And humans, unpredictable as they were, had found a way to answer it, not with fear, not with compliance, but with ingenuity and courage. Ethan looked out at the stars, stretching endlessly beyond the station's glass walls. The galaxy was vast, full of wonders and challenges that humanity had only begun to understand. Yet he felt a sense of purpose, a certainty that humans belonged here not as spectators but as participants. They had the tools to adapt, the mind to learn, and the spirit to endure. That was their power. That was why they could thrive. And somewhere in the shadows of the observation deck, Lysara watched. Her eyes followed him, calm and patient, knowing that the trials ahead would push him further. But she had seen enough to recognize potential, the spark of something rare and valuable. In humanity, she saw possibilities that could change the way her people regarded the galaxy, and perhaps the way the galaxy regarded humans forever. Ethan knew that tomorrow, the tests would grow more intricate, more demanding. He would face new puzzles, more subtle challenges, and perhaps moral dilemmas that stretched beyond human comprehension. But he also knew this. Human qualities, ingenuity, humor, empathy, adaptability, could shine even in the harshest scrutiny. And with each trial, he would demonstrate not only his worth, but the worth of all humanity. As he drifted to sleep, the hum of the station surrounding him, he felt a quiet determination. The game had begun, and humans were playing to win. The next day, Ethan awoke to the soft vibration of the station's systems, a gentle reminder that time moved differently in orbit. There was no sun to mark the morning, only the steady glow of the planet below and the dim shimmer of distant stars. He stretched and prepared himself mentally. Today would be different. The challenges were no longer simulations. They were real tests of observation, reasoning, and human creativity. Lysara met him at the entrance to a new chamber, one larger than the previous rooms. Its walls were made of a smooth, reflective material that seemed to ripple as one approached, as though the room itself were alive. Ethan's mind raced. The Virelians had a reputation for testing not just intellect, but the ability to respond to unfamiliar and unpredictable environments. He had to remain alert. "Ethan," Lysara said, her voice calm and even, "today you will face a trial that involves multiple layers: observation, understanding, and response. You must learn quickly, act decisively, and consider the consequences of each choice. Are you ready?" It was a species trait that had allowed them to survive the harshest climates and overcome countless challenges on their home world. The walls of the chamber shifted, revealing a large holographic map of an alien world. Strange terrain, rivers of glowing liquid, and cities that hovered above the ground appeared before him. Lysara gestured, and Ethan realized that he was to navigate the environment through a series of decisions and interventions. The scenario was a test of adaptability and problem-solving. A civilization faced crises that required immediate solutions, and he was their representative. At first, Ethan approached cautiously. He examined the holographic data, noting patterns, anomalies, and potential hazards. He realized that rushing would only create mistakes. He had to understand the underlying systems, geography, resource distribution, social dynamics, before taking action. His human mind worked quickly, connecting pieces that seemed unrelated. The first challenge appeared. A sudden natural disaster threatened a floating city. Ethan had limited resources, and the holographic citizens' lives depended on his choices. Protocol would have suggested evacuating only the nearest districts, but Ethan's instincts pushed him to consider alternative methods. Using the tools provided, he devised a network of energy shields and emergency transport systems that saved far more people than expected. The simulation adapted, acknowledging his success. Lysara observed silently, her gaze intense. She did not intervene, but Ethan could feel the weight of her attention. Humans often thrived under scrutiny. It was part of their evolutionary advantage. While other species might freeze under the observation of a more powerful being, humans could use it to sharpen focus, to think more creatively, and to perform at their best. Next came a diplomatic scenario. Ethan faced a council of alien delegates, each with conflicting demands over scarce resources. The simulation tested negotiation skills, ethics, and foresight. He realized that a simple compromise would not satisfy the complex needs of all parties. Instead, he proposed a solution that leveraged technology, resource sharing, and communication in ways the Council had not anticipated. It was bold, unconventional, and risky, but it worked. The delegates accepted his plan, surprised but impressed. Ethan felt a quiet satisfaction. Humans were clever, but their greatest strength was often moral reasoning coupled with adaptability. He had just demonstrated both in a way that no algorithm or protocol could predict. The simulation dissolved, leaving only the soft glow of the chamber walls. The final trial of the day was the most subtle and perhaps the most challenging. Lysara led him into a room filled with mirrors, or at least surfaces that reflected reality in strange ways. Ethan stepped carefully. Each reflection seemed slightly off, showing alternate versions of the room, of himself, even of Lysara. It was disorienting. He realized that the test was not just physical or intellectual, but psychological. Could he maintain focus, understanding, and ethical reasoning when perception was unreliable? Ethan closed his eyes briefly, taking a deep breath. Humans had always thrived in uncertainty. From navigating unknown continents to exploring the depths of the oceans, they had developed an instinct for observation, deduction, and adaptation. He opened his eyes and moved forward deliberately, noticing patterns in the distorted reflections, identifying which were accurate and which were illusions. Step by step, he advanced, making decisions based on reasoning rather than instinct alone, yet allowing intuition to guide subtle choices. Midway through the room, he encountered a final moral dilemma. Two holographic individuals were in danger, but he could save only one immediately. Choosing one over the other could result in the other being harmed, or worse, causing a chain reaction of failure in the simulation. Ethan paused, weighing options. Human history was full of moments where tough choices were necessary, and survival often depended on using judgment that combined ethics and practicality. He devised a creative solution, using the reflective surfaces to redirect a safety protocol, saving both individuals. The room shimmered and stabilized. He had not only solved the moral dilemma but demonstrated ingenuity that went beyond simple compliance with rules. Lysara's gaze met his, her expression unreadable yet holding a glimmer of approval. Hours passed as the chamber tested him through a series of increasingly complex scenarios. Each challenge layered upon the previous one, blending ethics, diplomacy, problem-solving, and strategic thinking. Ethan began to feel the strain, but his determination remained. Humans were built to endure, to learn quickly, and to improvise. That combination had allowed them to survive against overwhelming odds on their home planet, and it now served him well in this alien test. By the end of the day, Ethan emerged from the chamber exhausted but triumphant. His mind had been stretched to its limits, yet he had performed in ways that even the Virelians would find remarkable. Lysara waited at the exit, her posture calm, her gaze appraising. "You have performed admirably," she said softly. "Your methods are unorthodox yet effective. You possess qualities I have rarely seen: creativity, courage, adaptability, and a moral center that guides decisions even under pressure. Humans are young, yet you show potential that exceeds your years. You are unpredictable, yet your choices are guided by principles that are both sound and flexible. That is why you are interesting, Ethan Marlowe. That is why you are here." Humanity in him had shown a capacity to think, reason, and act with ingenuity in a way that even advanced civilizations could not fully anticipate. The observation deck that evening felt different. The stars outside seemed sharper, the planet below brighter. Ethan looked at Earth, thinking of its people, resilient, clever, unpredictable. Humans had faced plagues, wars, disasters, and yet they had survived. They had created, explored, and thrived in environments far harsher than space. And now, in the halls of a civilization older and wiser than Earth itself, humans were proving their worth again. Lysara joined him on the deck. "Tomorrow, the trials will continue," she said. "They will grow more difficult. You will face situations that test diplomacy, ethics, and strategy in ways that challenge your assumptions. But I have seen enough to know that you will not falter easily. You are capable." And we learn from every challenge. As Ethan returned to his quarters that night, he reflected on the day. Every simulation, every challenge, every moral test had been a reminder of what humans could achieve. Other species relied on experience and logic. Humans relied on creativity, intuition, and moral reasoning. That combination made them unpredictable, and in a galaxy that often underestimated youth and novelty, it made them formidable. He lay down, staring at the ceiling, letting the events of the day sink in. The challenges had been exhausting, yet exhilarating. He had proved to himself, and to the Virelians, that humans could think and act in ways that were unique. That was the essence of HFY, humanity standing tall, clever, and resilient even among the stars. Somewhere beyond the glass of the station, the stars shone silently. Ethan felt their quiet encouragement, a reminder that the universe was vast, full of possibilities, and that humans had only just begun to explore their potential. Tomorrow would bring new trials, new tests of intellect, morality, and creativity. And humans, he knew, were ready to rise to them. For now, he allowed himself a quiet smile. The trials were hard, the expectations high, and the observers many. But humanity, as represented in him, had shown brilliance, adaptability, and courage. The galaxy had begun to notice. And Ethan Marlowe, human diplomat, problem solver, and strategist, had taken one more step toward proving that humanity was not merely a fledgling species, but a force capable of thriving in the stars. The following morning, Ethan awoke with a renewed sense of purpose. The previous trials had tested his intellect, creativity, and moral judgment, but today he sensed that the challenges would grow more subtle and far-reaching. Lysara had already demonstrated that she valued adaptability, ingenuity, and integrity. Now, he suspected, the tests would measure diplomacy and human judgment on a broader scale. He entered the chamber to find a massive holographic display filling the room. Unlike the prior simulations, this one was not abstract. It depicted a small cluster of inhabited planets in a distant system, each with different resources, cultures, and needs. Ethan immediately recognized the nature of the trial. He would have to negotiate, manage conflicts, and make strategic decisions that affected entire civilizations. Lysara's voice resonated softly through the chamber. Ethan Marlowe, today you will face a scenario that tests your capacity to lead and reason in complex interstellar circumstances. The goal is not to dominate, but to understand, mediate, and find solutions that balance fairness with practicality. Success will require observation, diplomacy, and careful decision-making. Are you ready? From local disputes to international negotiations, humans had developed an uncanny ability to find compromise and adapt on the fly. This trial would be no different, only magnified on a galactic scale. The first scenario presented itself, a resource conflict between two planets. One had abundant water but limited energy, while the other had energy but minimal water. Both civilizations were technologically advanced but had cultural differences that made cooperation difficult. The task was clear. Ethan had to propose a solution that would satisfy both parties without causing resentment or long-term dependency. He studied the details carefully. A simple trade agreement would fail. The planets had mistrust built over centuries. Instead, Ethan devised a plan that combined resource sharing with mutual investment in infrastructure. By proposing the construction of shared facilities and joint scientific teams, he offered a solution that promoted collaboration while respecting autonomy. The simulation responded immediately. The planetary representatives engaged, tested, and challenged his plan. Ethan remained calm, answering questions, clarifying misunderstandings, and using analogies familiar to the alien cultures. Slowly, the scenario shifted from tension to cautious optimism. By the end of the simulation, the planets agreed to cooperate, establishing a framework for lasting partnership. Ethan allowed himself a quiet sense of satisfaction. Humans were often underestimated in diplomacy, yet their capacity to empathize, reason, and innovate had just turned potential conflict into progress. Lysara observed silently, her eyes scanning every expression, every choice. She did not interfere, allowing Ethan to act independently. Her trust in him, subtle though it was, underscored the point. Humans could rise to challenges when given both responsibility and freedom. The next scenario was even more complex. Ethan was presented with a planetary system experiencing internal unrest. Factions competed for control and resources were scarce. Unlike the previous scenario, there was no single correct solution. Every choice had consequences, and every action risked unintended outcomes. Ethan realized that this trial would test not just intelligence but patience, strategy, and moral judgment. He analyzed the factions carefully. One was technologically advanced but politically rigid. Another was flexible but lacked coordination. A third was isolated and distrustful of outsiders. Instead of imposing a solution, Ethan devised a multi-step plan. He created opportunities for dialogue, offered small but meaningful incentives for cooperation, and implemented systems to monitor outcomes and adjust strategies in real time. It was a delicate balance, requiring constant attention and subtle adjustments. As the simulation progressed, challenges arose that he had not anticipated. One faction attempted to sabotage the negotiation, while another threatened to withdraw entirely. Ethan adapted, using diplomacy, logic, and creativity to mediate conflicts, reassure hesitant participants, and maintain balance. His human ability to improvise and respond dynamically proved invaluable. While other species might rely on rigid protocol or brute authority, humans could navigate complexity through observation, reasoning, and flexible decision-making. Hours passed, yet Ethan remained focused. The final stage of the trial was presented, a diplomatic gathering with representatives from multiple species. The scenario was not purely strategic. It required understanding subtle social cues, managing egos, and preventing misunderstandings from escalating into conflict. Ethan realized that missteps here could undermine all previous efforts. He approached the gathering with care. Listening first, observing body language, and noting patterns in speech, he identified points of agreement and tension. Then he intervened, framing proposals that emphasized mutual benefit, respect, and shared values. His choices were deliberate, each word measured, each gesture intentional. Slowly, he noticed a shift. The representatives began to collaborate, negotiating terms that reflected fairness, ingenuity, and ethical consideration. Lysara finally spoke, her voice cutting through the chamber. "You have performed admirably, Ethan Marlowe. You demonstrate qualities that are rare in any species: clarity of thought, adaptability, and the capacity to balance intellect with empathy. You are unpredictable in the best sense, guided by principles, yet flexible enough to respond to challenges that defy expectation. I believe humans succeed not through power alone, but through creativity, observation, and the ability to learn from every situation. Adaptation and understanding are our greatest strengths." The simulations had tested him to the limit, yet he had proven a simple truth. Humans could think, act, and reason in ways that made them formidable even among advanced civilizations. Lysara remained beside him as they observed the planets in the holographic display. "Tomorrow, the trials will continue," she said. "You will face challenges that test not only intellect and diplomacy, but judgment under pressure, strategic foresight, and moral integrity. But I have observed enough to know that you are capable. Humanity, through you, has begun to demonstrate its true potential. We have always faced uncertainty and challenges, and we have survived by thinking, adapting, and persevering. That is what makes humans human. That is what makes us capable." The trials were personal, yes, but they also symbolized something larger: the capacity of a young species to rise, think creatively, and prove itself worthy of the broader universe. As the day ended, Ethan returned to his quarters. He reflected on what he had learned. The challenges were not just about intelligence or skill. They were about perspective, understanding, and the ability to adapt under pressure. Humans, despite being physically weaker or technologically behind in some respects, had qualities that no simulation or protocol could fully capture: ingenuity, moral reasoning, creativity, and the ability to improvise when rules failed. He lay down, gazing at the soft glow of Earth below. The planet was beautiful, fragile, and full of life. Humanity had survived millennia of challenges and had built a civilization capable of reaching the stars. Now, standing in a station orbiting Earth, facing a species older, wiser, and far more advanced, he had demonstrated that humans could hold their own. That they could impress, innovate, and succeed. Lysara's presence lingered in his thoughts. She had challenged him, tested him, and yet had allowed humanity's strengths to shine. He realized that the proposal she had whispered during the ceremony was more than a personal test. It was symbolic. Humans were being evaluated not only for skill, but for their potential to thrive in the galaxy. And through him, humanity was proving that it could rise to the occasion. Ethan smiled quietly, feeling a sense of determination settle over him. Tomorrow would bring new trials, more challenges, and situations that would push him further. But he felt ready. Humans had always excelled when the stakes were high, when creativity, courage, and moral reasoning were required. That combination, he knew, was what set them apart. And as he drifted toward sleep, the station humming softly around him, he made a silent promise. Humanity would continue to rise, to learn, and to show the galaxy what it was truly capable of. The challenges of today were only the beginning, and humans were ready to meet them head-on. Somewhere beyond the station, stars glimmered silently. Ethan knew that each point of light represented possibilities, challenges, and opportunities. Humanity was young, yet capable, clever, and resilient. And through him, they were beginning to carve their place among the stars, demonstrating that even a fledgling species could shine in a galaxy that had long assumed they were insignificant. Ethan closed his eyes, letting the soft hum of the station lull him. The trials were far from over, but he felt a quiet certainty. Humans, as always, would rise to the challenge. They would adapt, improvise, and prevail, not through power, but through intellect, courage, and an unyielding determination to succeed. Ethan awoke with a sense of anticipation that made his heart race. Today would be the final trial. The previous days had tested his intellect, creativity, and moral reasoning. He had proven that humans could think quickly, adapt under pressure, and navigate complex moral and diplomatic scenarios. But now, the stakes were higher. Today would determine whether humanity would earn a permanent place among the galaxy's more advanced civilizations, or be relegated to observers, forever underestimated. Lysara met him at the entrance to a grand chamber he had not yet seen. Its walls were lined with softly glowing panels that reflected not just light, but the presence of those inside. Delegates from multiple species, some observing and some participating, filled the chamber. The air was quiet, charged with expectation. Ethan felt the familiar flutter of nerves, but he steadied himself. Humans were accustomed to high-pressure situations, and they had always excelled when cleverness, empathy, and courage were required. "Ethan Marlowe," Lysara began, her voice calm yet commanding, "today you will face the culmination of your trials. This is not a test of knowledge alone. It is a test of character, judgment, and humanity's capacity to stand among the stars. You will be presented with a scenario that challenges diplomacy, strategy, and ethics simultaneously. Your decisions will carry weight not only for you, but for the people of Earth. Are you ready?" Trade disputes, environmental crises, and political unrest combined into a web of potential conflict. Delegates from the affected planets were present in holographic form, their expressions tense, their gestures demanding attention. Ethan recognized immediately that a simple solution would fail. He needed to consider multiple layers, understand the motives of each party, and find a way to create balance and cooperation. He began carefully, observing the patterns of interaction. Some delegates were vocal, pushing their demands forcefully. Others were cautious, waiting to see how the situation unfolded. Ethan remembered the lessons of the previous trials. Humans excelled not only through logic, but through empathy, adaptability, and moral reasoning. He could read subtle cues, detect intentions behind words, and anticipate reactions in ways that other species might overlook. His first step was mediation. He approached the delegates calmly, acknowledging each concern while framing a path toward mutual understanding. He proposed a system of resource sharing, cooperative infrastructure, and joint scientific initiatives. Unlike the previous trials, this scenario required negotiation on multiple levels at once. Ethan carefully balanced incentives, ensuring that no group felt slighted while encouraging collaboration. The delegates challenged him, questioning every proposal, testing his patience and resolve. Some attempted to exploit weaknesses, while others expressed skepticism about human judgment. Ethan responded with clarity, honesty, and creativity, explaining solutions and adjusting strategies based on feedback. He did not rely on brute force or authority. Instead, he relied on understanding and adaptability, the qualities that had allowed humans to survive and thrive in every environment they had ever encountered. Hours passed. Ethan faced moral dilemmas intertwined with strategic decisions. One planet's proposal would benefit its citizens but harm another's environment. Another demanded concessions that could destabilize trade. Each choice required careful thought, balancing long-term consequences with immediate needs. Ethan relied on human ingenuity and ethical reasoning, finding solutions that were practical, fair, and sustainable. The delegates, initially resistant, began to engage in meaningful dialogue, testing ideas rather than rejecting them outright. Lysara observed silently, her expression unreadable. Ethan felt her attention, and with it, the weight of responsibility. Humans often thrived when observed. Pressure sharpened their focus and creativity. This was his moment to demonstrate humanity's unique combination of intellect, courage, and moral insight. At one point, a sudden crisis was simulated. A planetary storm threatened a colony. Ethan had only minutes to respond. He coordinated emergency response plans, redirected resources, and communicated with the affected planets to minimize harm. The situation resolved successfully, with no casualties. His decisions were calculated, yet human ingenuity allowed him to improvise solutions that the simulation's designers had not anticipated. By the afternoon, the final phase began, a council session where all delegates would vote on whether Earth had earned recognition and the right to participate fully in interstellar cooperation. Ethan realized that this was the culmination of everything he had done. The vote would reflect not only his judgment, but humanity's character as a species. He addressed the council with calm confidence, highlighting humanity's history of resilience, innovation, and cooperation. He acknowledged past mistakes, demonstrated lessons learned, and presented a vision of humans as responsible and adaptable members of the galactic community. The delegates listened intently. Questions were raised, objections voiced, and challenges posed. Ethan responded with patience, clarity, and insight. He did not dominate or intimidate. He guided, explained, and demonstrated the practical value of human qualities. Slowly, the resistance softened. The logic of his arguments, coupled with the moral weight of his reasoning, won over the majority of the council. Finally, the vote was cast. The chamber held its collective breath. Ethan watched as the results flickered across the holographic display. The outcome was clear. Humanity had passed. The vote was unanimous. Humans had earned recognition, respect, and the opportunity to participate in interstellar cooperation on equal footing. A soft hum filled the chamber as the simulation dissolved. Lysara approached Ethan, her expression calm but carrying the faintest hint of pride. "Ethan Marlowe," she said, "you have demonstrated qualities that are rare in any species. Your ingenuity, adaptability, and moral judgment have proven humanity's potential. You have shown that even a young species can think, act, and decide with wisdom beyond its years. The galaxy will take notice." He looked around the chamber. The delegates, once skeptical, now regarded him with respect. Some even nodded in quiet acknowledgement, signaling their approval of humanity's approach. Ethan understood that this moment was more than personal. It was symbolic. Humans, often underestimated, had proven that they could stand alongside advanced civilizations as equals, not inferiors. Lysara's voice cut softly through his thoughts. "This is only the beginning. Humanity has potential, but it must continue to learn, adapt, and persevere. Today, you have earned recognition. Tomorrow, you must continue to prove that potential in action. That is what makes us strong, and that is what will allow us to thrive among the stars." Humans had not only survived the trials, but had proven that they could think, create, and act with wisdom, morality, and ingenuity. As he floated back to his quarters, Ethan reflected on the journey. The first day, when he had joked about a proposal, now seemed distant yet meaningful. That moment had set everything in motion. From humor, curiosity, and adaptability, humanity had demonstrated that they could excel even in the presence of older, wiser civilizations. Every trial, every decision, every creative solution had reinforced a single truth. Humans, underestimated as they often were, could rise to any challenge. That evening, Ethan stood at the observation deck, looking down at Earth. The planet was peaceful, beautiful, and fragile. He felt a profound connection to all humanity, the people who had survived, explored, and built a civilization capable of reaching the stars. And now, through him, they had been recognized by the galaxy itself. Lysara approached quietly. "Ethan, your performance has been exemplary. You have shown that humans are more than capable, more than clever, and more than resilient. They have a spark that is rare, and it shines brightly. That is what has allowed us to survive, and it is what will allow us to thrive among the stars." The trials had been demanding, but they had proven something vital. Humans were clever, adaptable, and capable of moral and intellectual judgment that even advanced species had to respect. As night fell across the station, Ethan allowed himself a quiet sense of triumph. The trials were over, the recognition earned. Humanity had proven that they could stand among the stars, not as novices, but as equals. The galaxy had noticed, and through ingenuity, empathy, and courage, humans had earned their place. Ethan drifted toward sleep, letting the hum of the station surround him. Tomorrow, new challenges would arise, but tonight he allowed himself to celebrate. Humans had survived countless hardships on Earth. They had explored the oceans, climbed the highest mountains, and reached the farthest stars. And now, standing in a station above their home planet, they had proven that they could thrive in a galaxy that had long underestimated them. Somewhere beyond the station, the stars twinkled quietly, a reminder of possibilities yet to come. Ethan knew that the journey was only beginning, but he felt a quiet certainty. Humans would continue to rise, to adapt, and to shine. And through him, humanity had taken its first, lasting step into the wider universe, earning respect, recognition, and a chance to shape the future.